So now that we're calling the right event handler on the right object, let's do something with it. So here's the idea. This department list component is going to track its current sort order, and it's going to use that to decide what the next sort order is based on what column the user clicked on. Now, information gets passed into this component via this .props from whatever other component or code creates the component. So if I look at my main, which is actually now over here somewhere. So here's my main code, and here's where I create my department list component, and I pass in mentor IDs and departments as props. So props come from the outside world and they're static. So I cannot change the value of props inside of either of these methods. What I want to do instead is use state. And so there's going to be a state object on this.state, and there's a method called SetState which allows me to change the contents of that object. And now React is smart enough to track changes to the state object. And basically every time I change the state, that's going to trigger a new call to render. So when I change the state for a component, it's going to re-render that component. And when it renders it, it's going to generate a new tree and compare that tree to what's already in the DOM so that it only updates the things that actually need to be updated. So in order to set this up, the first thing I want to do is define the properties on the state object. And I'm going to do that in a constructor. So in ES6, I can define a constructor using the keyword constructor, and it's going to take one parameter, which is props. And then the first thing I want to do is call super props. So this is actually going to call the constructor for react.component, passing in props to that constructor. Now I can go ahead and create this.state, and that's going to be an object. And the only thing I care about right now is going to be an order property. And my initial sort order is going to be ascending by department. So that's more or less the order that things are in now. And then here in change order, I'm going to get what column the user clicked on. So the idea is if they clicked on the department header and the department, I'm in plus department order, I'm going to switch that to minus department. If I'm in minus department and they clicked on department, it's going to be plus department. If they click on mentor, it's going to be plus name. If they click on that and it's already plus name, it's going to be minus name, and so on. So here's the logic for that. So if call equal department, and probably I should define some constants for that because I'm going to be using these sort of all over the place. So let me define a few constants. And then I can use depth call here and name call here. And then my initial order is going to be depth call ascending. So if call is depth call, Then if this dot state dot order is depth call ask, then I want to call this dot SetState, and I give it an object that overrides properties in the current object. So I want to override order and set it to depth call desk. If it's anything else and the user clicks on the department column, then this dot set state is going to be depth call ask. So if I'm in descending by department or name ascending or name descending, clicking on the department column is going to put me in ascending order of department. So else, if I get here, that means the column is name call. So if this dot state dot order is name call ask, this dot set state order name call desk. Else, anything else, I'm going to change it to name call ascending. And then console.log new order colon this dot state dot order. So every time I set the state, that's going to trigger a re-render, but the render isn't actually using the state just yet. So I'm going to have to make some code for that. So let's go ahead and click on department. So the new order is plus department. Actually, I was already in plus department. So let me see what's going on there. So I should have already been in ascending order. So let's go ahead and put a breakpoint in there. Actually, let me go ahead and console.log old order. So there's the old order. And it doesn't look like my constructor is getting called. So let's take a look at what's going on there. Oh, well, constructor doesn't actually log anything, so that's okay. So it says this.state.order is already plus depth. So let's go ahead and put a breakpoint in there. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to the debug build here. And I have to go to RKYM, sources, Webpack, department list. So let's go ahead and put a breakpoint right there and click on department. All right, so my current order is plus depth. Call is depth, so that matches. Plus depth plus depth. This dot set state order depth called desk. Oh, this doesn't actually happen until after render. I think this actually happens somewhere else. So I call set state, but the actual change is deferred, I think. Yeah, so okay, so let me go ahead and change the code a little bit. So let me go ahead and restart the dev server. So let me try this. So what I want to do is, rather than writing it at the end here, let's write it right here at the beginning of render. So new order is depth. Click. Old order is depth, new order is minus depth. Click again, old order is minus depth, new order is depth. So that's actually working. So it's just that set state doesn't actually get updated until after it React has a chance to do something with it. Okay, so this seems to be doing the right thing. They're toggling. Great. So let's go ahead and actually do some sorting. Now, the way sort works in JavaScript is sort is a method on arrays, and it takes a function that takes two arguments. It takes a comparison function. So for example, let's define a comparison function. And it's going to take two numbers, A and B. And if A less than B, return -1. So if the first thing is less than the second thing, you return -1. If A equal B, return 0. If A greater than B, which is the only case that's left, return +1. So that's what a sort function looks like. And then if I give it an array, like 3, 7, 1, 4, 2, 9, 0, dot sort, I pass in my comparison function, and it sorts correctly. So what I want to do is I want to define a comparison function that uses the sort order specified and does different kinds of comparisons based on the sort order. And what I want to sort is this array of departments here. So I'm going to define that as a function local to the render function. So we'll call this compare, CMP. And it's going to take a department 1 and a department 2. Let's call it compare department. And I'm just going to use a switch here. So switch on this dot state dot order. And then I have 4 cases. So case, depth, call, ascending, depth, call, descending, name call, ascending, name call, descending. So to compare two departments on the department name, that's going to just be d1.dept, and then I'm going to use the function locale compare to compare two strings in the current locale. And this actually does exactly what I want it to do here. So I'm going to compare d1.dept to d2.dept. And I'm just going to return that value. So that should be ascending order, and then this one, I'm just going to compare d2.dept.locale compare to d1.dept. So reverse order. So those two cases are pretty easy. Let's see if they do anything. So this .props.departments, here I want to sort by compare departments. And then the result of that is going to be an array that gets mapped. So let's go ahead and see whether that worked. So I have an error. Cannot read property state of undefined and compare departments. So this is a problem because I'm passing in a function that's getting called by this function. And so the environment when this gets executed is not the same as the current object. So here too I need to bind to this. So if I bind to this, this is going to be the current department list object. And if I have the current department list object, then I can do this dot state dot order. It's actually the same thing that we did with the click event handler. So now, if I click, the sort order changes. So let's go ahead and look at the list. It all looks pretty good here. Now, since this is clickable, I want to actually change the cursor when I hover over these two things. And so I could define a style in my CSS sheet, but just to keep this easy, I'm going to go ahead and put it right here on these THs. So style equal, and then I have to give it an object, cursor pointer. Actually, this has to be a piece of text. So that'll make it a pointer cursor. And save. Good, so that turns into the pointer. And I click and it sorts. So this one's a little more tricky. So in order to sort by name, I have to get the name. And I did that before when I was outputting the department table. It's just going to be the mentor IDs sub department.mentor ID. So let's go ahead and do I have mentor IDs bound? Let's see, not yet. So let's go ahead and say so that's still on props. And then this time I remembered it's lowercase. So that should be the last name. And same thing with N2. Except there's a problem here, because if there's no mentor defined, then d1.mentorID is going to be the string 0, And then this is going to be an undefined value. And I'm going to try to take the last name property of undefined, which is not going to work. So I need some special logic that's going to handle undefined values. So let's go ahead, and the way I'm going to handle undefined values is I always want them to be at the bottom of the list here. So if I'm in ascending order, I want the sort order for undefined values to be greater than z. And if I'm in descending order, so z's down to a's, I want it to be before a, so that all of the undefined ones always go to the bottom. So since I'm going to use different values for the sort order, I'm actually going to put the calculations of name down here. So let's do, I'll go ahead and define var n1 and n2. And then let's do the values. So if d1 dot mentor ID equal 0, then n1 is, and these are ascending order, so I want something that's greater than z. Else, then I have a real mentor, so n1 is equal to mentor ID sub d1 dot mentor ID dot last name. And then I want to do exactly the same thing with d2 here. And then I can go ahead and return d1 dot, actually n1 dot locale compare n2. And then the case for descending order by name is almost the same, except I'm going to compare n2 to n1. So that should be it for the sorting. Let's see how that works. So save. So that still works. Now let's try mentor. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to do. So this is fine. That looks alphabetical to me by mentor name. But if I do that, it actually shows the dashes at the top instead of putting them at the bottom. So the names are in the correct descending order, but the dashes are at the top, because I forgot to change that. So that's going to be before my first one, I think. So let's try it. So good. So it floated all of those at the bottom. And I don't have any mentors who start with A. The trick here is whether uppercase characters are less than or greater than lowercase characters. So let's actually try something. So locale compare Aaron A. So that means that this is greater than that. So let's start with okay. So that is greater than that. I got it backwards, and this is less than that. So that's right. So let's try So this is less than that, which is good because this should be at the bottom. All right, so I think we're in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave that the way it is, so we're fine. All right, so that's the sorting. Seems to work correctly. And then I want to give a visual indicator of what's going on here. So when I re-render this department list, it's also going to re-render the department header. So every time I end up calling SetState in my change order handler, that's going to re-render the department list, which also re-renders the department header, which passes, which can be made to pass the current sort order down as well. So right now I'm just passing a click handler. I'm also going to pass in order equal this dot state dot order. So that's going to tell me what the current order is in my department header. And then in my department header, I'm going to set order to this dot props dot order because it's being passed in as a property. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional character, a glyph, to my header text. So I'm going to use an upward pointing triangle for small to big, and a downward pointing triangle for big to small. And one of those next to department if you're sorted by department, and one of those next to mentor if you're sorted by mentor. So let's put a space in there. And I looked this up before. So the character for upward triangle is, hold on a sec. Actually, let me go ahead and look it up. So Unicode glyphs. So here's a Unicode character table, and it's somewhere around 2100, give or take. So let's scroll down to 2100. Lots of characters to choose from. All right, so here's some arrows. There's dells. There's a bunch of triangles somewhere here. Maybe it was 28. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is what I want. So I want this one, which is 25 BC for downward, and this one 25 B2 for upward. So let's go ahead and upward is 25 B2. And then downward try is 25 BC. So that's the Unicode. And then right here, I'm going to go ahead and put a JavaScript expression. And let's go ahead and it's going to take a couple of lines. So if order equal depth call ask, then, and actually I want to use a ternary operator here. Yeah, let me use a ternary operator here because I just want an expression that returns a value. So if it's that, then I want to return or include that's ascending, so upward triangle. Otherwise, order equal depth called desk. Question, I want to return downward try. Otherwise, empty. Okay, and then I need another set of parens just to make sure that everything is good here, because the order tends to be a problem. Good. Okay, so now if I've gotten that right, let's go ahead and see. So I'm going to go ahead and click. Good, so it's changing. It's not actually displaying what I want it to display because of escaping, so let's fix that. So let's try back U for Unicode. Good, okay. So, small to big, big to small. So let's do the same for mentor. So I'm going to copy this whole thing here. And this is just going to be name call ask. So by default, we're in ascending by department. Now we're in ascending by mentor, descending by mentor, and that's it. So last thing I need to do is build the production version of this. So I'm going to stop the dev server. I'm going to execute npm run build, and that's going to use webpack-p to build the production version. The final bundle is 124K, which is not tiny, but it's not too excessive. Oh, and I stopped my server, so let's go rkym, and there it is. So test that works, and perfect.